And that's my regret, is that I didn't fix it when it was smaller. So I would tell people, if you can, don't let it go. Fix what you can, because it's very foundational. Tagging is so foundational.
I wonder what people you targeted for this one-on-one. Is it leaders? Is it not only leaders? Managers?
It was the whole spectrum. It really was the whole spectrum.
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. Today, we have a very special guest, which is an amazing professional and a good friend. She has an "it takes a village to raise a cloud" mindset. And on her previous role, she led FinOps at 3M, leading to millions in savings. I'm happy to welcome Manager of Cloud FinOps at Carnival Cruise Lines, Sherri Wooldridge. Sherri, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Now I'm doing fantastic.
Good. Let's have some fun.
Let's do it. And sure, you have many years of experience in FinOps. So I'm really curious, what is this one thing that you got wrong when you started your FinOps career?
Probably the biggest one is that I didn't have enough of a forward mindset to have a tagging strategy that would scale and be easy to manage the mergers and acquisitions and changes in direction and all those kinds of things. So I wish I had done that differently, but no particular system is perfect. I recognize that, but I sure wish I had done it a little differently at 3M.
And so you're basically saying, hey, you need to make sure your fundamentals are strong. Like before you talk about reporting, before you start generating dashboards, make sure the underneath data is well tagged and well classified so you can show things that are valuable. Can you just give us an example for something that is more specifically got wrong from tagging perspective?
Right. Well, I kind of I could have changed it. Okay, let me just take accountability for that. I could have changed it if I had really understood what was going on. But the classification or categorization of the applications that were used and developed at 3M blossomed really quickly. And we didn't have a good strategy for how finite or how discrete, I should say, we wanted the data to be. And we didn't really talk to finance to find out, well, how do they want to categorize the data on the finance side? 3M wasn't at the point when I was there anyway of doing chargeback, but there was a lot of showback going on. And so we just had this 3-digit number. Well, there was no at all meaning to any of the digits in the number. We probably should have used alpha characters as the value of this application ID, which is what I'm referring to as a key. And so it was really difficult just to look at a number unless you wanted to memorize all 400 numbers. And at some point they were going to run out because it was, hundreds and hundreds of numbers. So I would just say, I wish I had worked more with finance and thought through the scalability of what we were doing when we use that as a very important metric and key.
So if I'm following, you're saying, first of all, start from the end, like who is your customer, what he wants to see, and then build tagging accordingly. And also think about scale. So when you have a small amount of tags, you don't need to be very readable or understandable, but in large scale, it will become an issue.
Yes, it did become an issue because we had an acquisition, and then suddenly we didn't explain it very well to the acquisition folks, and it suddenly got out of control in that the numbers were just randomly kind of being assigned to teams without any plan, without any conversation about what did we want out of those numbers ultimately, how did we want to report it, and who was going to manage it. We didn't really manage the numbers either. We tried at some point. So the end result is, at least when I left, there were a lot of application IDs that got deleted and never used again. And So it became a little unwieldy.
Absolutely. And when you realize that that needs to be done better, how did you go about it? Did like a focused effort to fix it? Did you plan like a gradual fixing program?
I'll just be honest. No, it because then by the time I switched, those application IDs were being used by other teams to do more of like a CMDB kind of thing too. And that's my regret, is that I didn't fix it when it was smaller. So I would tell people, if you can, don't let it go. Fix what you can, because it's very foundational. Tagging is so foundational at the resource level. And so, no, I didn't tag. I didn't fix it. But we did pull together a tag team that helped us at least come up with other keys that would make sense to run the business. So it's not like that was the only tag. It's just that one became the really important one. And I don't think I did a good job of managing that.
Yeah. I think it's a very important message to everyone listening to us. Like, set the foundations straight. In the end of the day, it all boils down to how your data is tagged and how it's organized, and everything you'll do in the future will derive from that. And it's also an amazing point. Like, tags is not only used for FinOps, it's also used for other purposes.
That's right.
So you also need to take this into consideration as you do that.
Correct. And I think I got the impression many times that engineers found it to be an annoying thing to have to pay attention to, not realizing that they were contributing to the bigger effort for the business to be able to know what it's spending, when and where and how. And so it is so foundational that we just sort of say, oh, it's tagging. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned acquisitions, which is a very fascinating topic to me. I can tell you that I had in the past a startup that I sold to Rapid7, a bigger company, and I felt all the pains of the acquisition, especially around integrating our product into their product. And I'm very curious about the challenges of doing that from a FinOps perspective. If you can share a bit about that.
Right. Well, first of all, it's culture. I mean, you have to account for that. And different ways of doing DevOps, very different. This group that we acquired was more, they were not in the cloud. We were not only acquiring them, but we were helping them to pull into the cloud. So in addition to FinOps, it was cloud mindset that had to be taken care of. And it was kind of hard for people to do that. And we could say, this is the way, thus saith the Lord, you got to do it this way. But that's not always really what happened, and for various business reasons. But eventually that worked out. And I think that people were grateful that we pushed into a cloud first mentality and helped them along. On the other hand, I will tell you too, I've seen the opposite. So at Carnival, we had brands that were mushed together and then they pulled apart. And that's also has its own interesting implications. And they still are somewhat intertwined with some of their infrastructure. And that causes problems when it comes to who owns this spend? Who did this? Yeah. So both of those scenarios, now those are business scenarios, and engineers just frequently don't realize that impacts what is going to happen on the finance side in engineering. Engineers can affect that when you have an acquisition, culture, and following the rules, if you will, have to be enforced. And the engineers need to help the business to be part of the bigger picture.
And how did you help educate the new business unit that were now merged to accept this cloud mindset?
It was a lot of one-on-one conversations. It was developing relationships with those who were in the trenches, trying to understand what it meant now to be part of 3M. And so, and I kind of had already a lot of credibility in 3M that I could use to help these acquired teams. It was very much relationship building. I'm not an engineer. I don't pretend I am. I'm kind of surprised you have me on your show since
Yeah.
I'm not an engineer. But I really try to get into the head of the engineers and help them see the bigger picture. So I just kept doing conversations with people, trying to help them. I'd send them a screenshot of something in email and say, "Hey, I'd love to talk about this. Are you aware? If you're not aware, could we have a conversation about it? What's your plan? Should I worry about this trend that I'm seeing?" And very humbly come to them in the, "I don't know what you're doing all the time, your engineering team, but I sure would like to help you so we can make this a positive experience for the business."
That's just such a great point. I can tell you I experienced the same thing myself as a CEO. When you're leading a change, you always think about, okay, let's think about in scale. How do I send an email to everyone? We'll notify about the change. How do I don't know, I now send, we're doing a webinar or Zoom to tell everyone about the change. But in the end of the day, you cannot avoid the one-on-one. Like in the end of the day, sitting in front of a person is what needs to be done. I wonder like what people you targeted for this one-on-one. Is it leaders? Is it not only leaders,
It was
managers
it was the whole
above?
spectrum. It really
Oh,
was the
wow.
whole spectrum. I enjoyed talking to the engineers who were just getting to know what FinOps was even about, and cloud. Like I said, they had to learn cloud too, and just finding out who they were and giving them a call and say, "Are you interested in chatting about this or that?" I did show up at some agile scrum meetings to talk to a team, and we had a tech forum there that was really helpful every other week. The whole division of engineers, which were way over 1,000, could attend this tech forum. It was just a call-in kind of thing, and I went to the person who managed that, and I said, "Could you please put me on the schedule?" So I had a wider audience. Not all just engineers, there were leaders on there too. On the other hand, I did know enough of the managers to be able to have conversations with them. I think that's a pretty important thing, to have the confidence to be able to go to leadership and ask what their plan is and how can I help. They're very busy people. So I tried to make the point quick and just get to the heart of the matter. And it wasn't to complain. That was not the intent. It was to offer, "Can we do this better?" And I think they appreciated that. And then I had other higher level managers that now went into more the corporate area that I was responsible to report to every month, do a reporting kind of things. And that was a small group. So your question was, who did I target? I targeted everybody.
Everyone. Everyone.
Yeah.
And I think there were like a few very nice golden nuggets here that I want to call out. Okay. One, to all of our listeners, even in enterprises as big as 3M and Carnival, you need to do one-on-ones. Like sending emails and sending to distribution lists is not enough, right? That's a pretty big one. And I also like the tip of like piggyback existing meetings. So like getting a slot on the calendar is not always easy. However, there are existing meetings that you can plug yourself into and give value to the agenda of that meeting. For example, the Scrum or sprints meetings. Okay, that's some great tips. Some great tips. And Sherri, as you know, on our show, we have an amazing research team that did some background research on you. And we got a question from one of your former managers. Okay. And the question is, it's actually about the FinOps role.
Oh,
And he was curious to hear how much of FinOps or your time is dedicated to educate the executive team or
oh,
leadership on the variable nature of cloud cost versus CapEx, which is what they're used to.
yeah. That was, towards the last year of my work at 3M. That was a really important thing. It seemed that leadership suddenly realized what was going on in the cloud dollar-wise, and they saw me as the person who knew how to explain it. I was also, of course, accountable, not just for explaining it, but accountable for these cost avoidance measures, whatever they would be, with training the engineers versus buying savings plans and all that stuff. And it became very obvious to me that leadership needed, and I think wanted, they were asking the questions, so they wanted to know the details, and it was surprising to me how deeply they wanted to know the details, at least in my experience. So it would become a conversation more than just a quick email and then an answer. And so I appreciated that. It made me solidify in my heart, really, that I was doing the right thing for the business. Could I explain what I was doing? Did it make sense to the leader? Could they act on it? That was the part that was the most frustrating to me, is what I was giving them something they were going to act on, and I wasn't there long enough to really see if that resulted in action, but it was a lot of time spent with leaders, more than you might think at that time.
But sounds like they were interested, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. And Sherri, I want to do a quick transition to a topic that is obviously close to my heart. And that is dealing with waste and optimization of the infrastructure. And, if you look at the FinOps, state of the FinOps report, you can see in the last 5 years, you can see that waste reduction and driving action with engineer is still the top priority. Why do you think this problem hasn't been solved yet?
Oh, well, because something we talked about before, there's always acquisitions and mergers and divestitures and new ways of doing business and new technologies coming out by the CSPs and the SaaS providers, and new expectations of budgets. There are new employees coming on, new managers. I mean, there will always be waste because there will always be changes, in my opinion. Now, that's not the only reason waste happens, is because of changes. Some of it's just purely we're going too fast and furious to clean up our mess. So that's a culture thing, and I think it's just human nature, especially when engineers are under the gun. They're kinda gonna leave those development environments out there, or they're gonna forget all the snapshots they created or whatever. I really get that. I just don't think that's ever going to really go away. Um, I mean, I look at raising children. Did the cleanup ever go away? No. I would train them on how to clean the bathrooms, get that under control, and then I would have to teach them how to do yard work and clean up it never will end, really, for our
And
business.
maybe change is an integral part of the cloud, right? Because it's very much variable, and the result there always a mess that you need to fix to, I don't know, go to the next level.
I think if engineers catch the vision of, we need to avoid the situation in the first place. We need to have a plan to avoid it, whether that's how they architect or um, controls put into place later or processes running to clean up behind the scenes. If they understand what they save in terms of dollars when they clean up their messes or do the waste management, could save a couple of people their jobs. I mean, I had an engineer one time talk to me, liked him very much, but he said, "Well, why do you keep talking to me about this FinOps stuff? I really don't. It doesn't matter to me, really." And I said, "We're in a business, and what you do could go off the rails and disable a plan to hire more people. You keep screaming that you don't have enough engineers. We have to watch the money that we spend in the cloud so that maybe we can enable extra money to be there so you can have somebody to help you." And he kind of said, "Yeah, okay, whatever." Couple of years later, he calls me. I'm on a plane getting ready to take off, and he said, "You remember that conversation we had about FinOps? Well, I really need to understand that now." I kind of got the impression he was accountable now for doing something to develop a program or something. But I think that waste management is the tactical part of it. The strategy is, how can we free up money from how the engineers perform in the cloud to give you more people or more tooling or whatever that costs money.
And would you say that maybe instead of talking about saving money, talking about reallocating money for more headcount or new AI services, whatever it is, it's a better conversation to have with engineers?
Yeah, I typically use the word cost avoidance. That's almost always the way I refer to it, because to me, savings is against the budget. I mean, we've had many conversations in the FinOps Foundation about that, and I truly believe that. So if you avoid the costs, then you have freed up that cash for something else that makes sense for the business.
No, that's a great approach. And we talk about reallocating money to a new and exciting project. I wonder, how do you look at the FinOps for AI? There is a lot of discussion around that. I think there are tons of sessions about that at FinOps X. I wonder how that blends into your FinOps work.
Um, right now at Carnival, we're just like dipping our toes into it. We've had conversation with the CSPs ongoing about it, and we're thinking of ways to use it. But I think probably what you're referring to is I see, and I do think JR talked about this at the foundation, at the FinOps X at some point. It's AI for FinOps versus FinOps for AI. So AI for FinOps, the way I think of it, and I think JR is saying the same thing. AI for FinOps is, how do you use this incredible, these models to give you a better perspective on how to practice, what are the tactical things that AI can do for you that relieve a human of the tedium of some of the things that happen, or some of the things that are required to correctly spend the cash. However, FinOps for AI is what I think actually is the FinOps role at the moment as teams go into implementing AI in their business. So, and JR made the point that it's really no different. FinOps for AI is not a whole lot different than FinOps, for example, for GPUs, or another high-priced kind of resource, which I sort of agree with, except it seems that AI is going to be more of an unknown in the beginning. GPUs, you can tell what's going to happen at some level. So I still don't know how that's going to flesh out, but I think that FinOps is going to have to be very aware of how the AI processing could get out of control accidentally. I think there's more of a risk of that. Maybe I'm being doomsdayer. I don't know. But when I talk to the CSPs about it, I get kind of a, why do you think that? And it's a gut level thing, that knowing how models are created and the work that needs to go into them, I could see that would be a big expense for companies before they realize it.
I'm sure it's going to be a big expense, and I agree with your gut feeling very much. Is that at the moment a priority, FinOps for AI? So beyond, being aware and thinking about it, do you spend time in that in
No.
practice?
No, I don't. I've been, like I said, I've been talking to folks about it, but at least at Carnival, it's not on my roadmap, certainly not for this year, to come up with the FinOps for AI kind of service offering. It might be, and I don't know about it, but so far that has not been the discussion.
Yeah, it's good to hear that. I can tell you that I talk to many FinOps practitioners, and there is like discrepancy between how much it's being discussed in the community into how much in practice people actually deal with that, because companies, like I said, they're just dipping their toes in AI. There aren't many companies out there that are heavily invested into AI at the moment. So it's still a fraction of your bill. And as a result, it was also a fraction of the FinOps work. So there is like some level of like discrepancy between how much is being discussed to how much in practice people deal with it. So I actually want to thank you on behalf of the FinOps community for saying it out loud on the podcast, so people will remember that they're sane, even if they're not dealing a lot with FinOps for AI.
True. Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome.
Well, that's great. Cool. Thank you for all the insights and sharing with your amazing experience, Sherri. It's been fascinating. I would actually want to go to the next part of the podcast and learn about you on the personal level. So today you live in Salt Lake City, Utah, or around Salt Lake City, Utah,
Yep.
right?
Yes, I'm up against the western side of the Rocky Mountains. Yes.
Nice, nice. And how did you get there to Utah?
Well, I got married at a very young age and we moved to Miami, Florida. So I got my master's degree at U of M, and my husband worked at the medical school, medical campus. He's a eye doctor. And that we just felt like that was not where we wanted to raise a family. And so we always say God has a sense of humor because Rob's a Southerner and I'm a Yankee. And so he said, "You'll never live north of the Mason-Dixon line." Do you know what that is, Alon?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Never live north of the Mason-Dixon line, and you'll never live west of the Mississippi. And so when the job came for him, it was in Utah, which is both of those things. So, but we love it. Love it, love it. I've had all of our children here, and it's pretty. It's a nice place to be, and it's a great city. I like it.
Very nice, very nice. And I'm curious about your reading and movies habits. So first of all, you read lately my book.
I did read
Sherri.
your book. I did, and I loved it. And I would tell everyone who's watching this podcast, you have to get that book. Yeah, I read it on. Read it on several airplane flights and just devoured it. I loved it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So obviously this is your favorite book, but if we keep my book aside, okay, what would be your favorite book?
Oh, hands down, it's the Bible. That's the thing that guides my life. But otherwise, I don't read a lot of fiction. I tend to like to read biographies and those kinds of things. Don't have a particular one I love, but I really enjoy history and biographies in general.
Anything in specific that you read and you would recommend?
Of a book, you mean?
Yes.
No, because I like them all. My husband would tell you that if Amazon ever runs out of book, they'll just call me and ask me to ship out some of mine. I'm a
Nice.
voracious reader. I do a lot of, I'm a really I just have the gift of being able to pick up stuff in reading quickly and to enjoy it at the same time. He reads lots of World War II stuff, but I read bigger biography things. So,
And what's your favorite book in the Bible?
well, many, but in the last couple of years have become quite enchanted with the book of Deuteronomy, which very few people even know where it is in the Bible. It is it's a wonderful book. It has a verse in there that is also kind of reflected in Joshua about be strong and courageous, don't be fearful or dismayed. And that's the way I try to live my life, even amongst culturally what's going on in my own personal life. Be strong and courageous. I'm with you. What's there to fear? Kind of thing. So
I love it. And I will just mention that our reading habits is very, very similar because the Bible is my favorite book as well. I read a chapter a day, by the way, for
yeah,
a few years by now.
yeah.
So I already finished it, at least the Old Testament, like 5 times. And Deuteronomy is an amazing book. Amazing book. It's basically Moses' word to the world, So, and these specific phrases that you mentioned are extremely powerful. I have to agree.
Yeah, I love it.
Cool. And Sherri, what do you do for fun?
Well, I try to garden, not vegetable gardens. That's my husband's job, but I do like to do other kind of gardening. I haven't been able to do very much of it this year for a variety of personal reasons. We have grandchildren, so a hobby is just hanging out with grandchildren. We have some on the East Coast, some down in Arizona, and then a couple of them here, and they just are just delightful. So that's a hobby, I guess.
That's great. That's great. And Sherri, I'm sure that many people that listen to us right now would love to reach out to you, maybe ask some questions. What is the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm not really consistent in checking the FinOps Foundation Slack channel. I should be. I know that, but LinkedIn is probably the best to get a hold of me. Send me a message. And by the way, there are a couple of Sherri Wooldridges. So it's Sherri Baldwin Wooldridge if you're looking for me, and it's at Carnival. So that's for that.
Thank you for that. I'm sure people would love to learn more from you. Sherri, thank you so much for the genuine, honest, and direct conversation that I learned a lot from. I think like the strongest message is like keep your foundation strong, and that will make you very successful as a freelance practitioner. So thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to you. Thanks again to our listeners who are consistently listening to the podcast. And I hope you're learning and enjoying it just as much as I do. Please follow us on Substack and keep on telling your friends about us. Thank you, Sherri. And thanks everyone for another fascinating, fun episode of FinOps in Action. See you next time.
That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with tip detection and remediation tools that drive action.